What is up, guys? Welcome to Off the Rails. That's so weird to say. We did a whole rebrand. We've got a new podcast name. I'm turning 30, or at the time when you're listening to this, I will be 30, which is wild, which is also why we're talking about all the fun things today. We're talking about anxiety. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I thought what better than to bring on Queen Icon Legend. She is a licensed therapist for millennials. I found her on Instagram. She is just awesome. I cannot wait to pick her brain. So, guys, welcome to the podcast, Kelly McKenna. Kelly, welcome.
Hi, Morgan. I'm excited to be here with you today.
I cannot wait to talk to you. I'm going to try my best. And I was telling my friends this. I'm like, I'm so excited about this podcast. I don't want to make this all about me, although I'm having quite a few issues. If all my people who have followed me on Instagram, it's just been a month. I turning 30 has been brutal. It's been an up and down roller coaster with my emotions, my mental health. I suffer from anxiety greatly. So I'm going to try and not make this about me. I've got a bunch of listener questions, but let's just dig into it. I start all the podcasts. I know you're a therapist, you have your shit together, but therapists aren't perfect humans either.
Certainly not.
We've got all of our own issues. So Kelly, what is the most off the rails thing that has happened to you lately? Does anything come to mind? You're just that was chaos.
Give me a second.
I'm trying Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's funny because I listened to a few of your podcasts and I heard you ask high low, and I was like, I've got that on lock.
We can start with that. We can start with a high and a low.
So yesterday I went to the Formula One races in Miami,
Fun.
And that was super fun. And then I got home and my dog immediately vomited on the rug the second I took her out of the crate. And I'm like, always just
we love
do
that.
On the tile, man, you know?
And that is why I don't have an animal. I'm I can't. I'm also just not home enough, but I live vicariously through my friends with pets. So I support you guys, but okay, there's a high and a low. That's
yes.
That's sure. And also if anything comes to mind, you want to interrupt me and you're like, this is the most unhinged off the rails thing that I've done lately. You know what? You just let me know.
All right, we'll do.
Okay. Let's dig into, I want to talk all things. You help people with anxiety. You help people with confidence. You help people with overthinking. Those are all things that I talk about very frequently, but let's just start with anxiety. I think that's the overarching theme that I want to talk about. Totally. What is anxiety for those who are curious if they have it? A lot of people ask me questions when I said that you were coming on. They're like, I don't know the difference between anxiety and stress. Can you dig into that?
Yes. So I'll start off by saying, I'm a therapist. I specialize in anxiety. And like you, Morgan, I also have anxiety myself. So it's something I can relate to and feel very deeply. And I think that anxiety is something that every single human on this planet experiences, right? Mm-hmm. It is a totally normal response for our brains to have. But I think that probably the question that your listeners are really asking is what's normal anxiety and what's an anxiety disorder, right? Yeah. And so that's really when that feeling of nervousness or overthinking or uncertainty kind of starts to impact the different areas of your life, right? Mm-hmm. So it makes it harder for you to show up at work or in relationships or to sleep or to, take care of yourself. Then I think that that's when we're kind of going from stress or normal anxiety into it's helpful to talk to somebody about it, get some help, and try and get it under a more manageable place.
Right. For those who are suffering with anxiety, and this is something I've always wondered, is it hereditary? It does run in my family. It's something that I do think was love my parents, but I think it was passed down to me. Is that something that is anxiety a learned something, or is it anyone who has anxiety, it is hereditary?
I think it can be a little bit of both. Okay. There's not a gene that you can say okay, I inherited this gene and now I'm automatically going to have anxiety, right? But I think that a lot of it is very much learned. It's passed down the way that we learn to cope with things. Mm-hmm. And there is research that people whose parents have mental health issues, you're more likely to have mental health issues too. So I think that can certainly play a factor. But
Mm,
I think a lot of it is sort of how we're taught to look at situations, how we're taught to deal with certain situations. What we see as like healthy responses that maybe aren't so healthy that we learned and picked up over time too.
right. When do you know if you should get help for anxiety? Like a lot of people ask me like, when do I know that I need to go to therapy? When do I know that I need to get on medication?
Yeah.
Like what are those signs that you should be on the lookout for?
Yep. So first I would say even like asking that question is probably a really great sign number one, right? If you're
Mhm.
thinking, should I go to therapy? Like you probably should. It's not going to
Yeah.
harm by any means. A lot of my clients I'll work with for a few months when something stressful is happening. And I have other clients I've worked with for many, many years, and they want kind of like that long-term support.
Mhm.
So either is totally fine, but I think if you're asking yourself that question, that's usually a pretty good sign that like something in your life is not going the way that you want it
Yeah.
to. Some portions of the anxiety are feeling a little bit out of control. And so talking to somebody is going to do nothing but help.
Mhm.
In terms of medication, I think that can be a little bit more of a complex question. I generally tend to recommend doing therapy first
Mhm.
because it's proven that therapy plus medication is much more effective than just medication by itself.
Right.
So when I start working with a new client, we'll do therapy for maybe, I don't know, like 2 to 4 months and kind of see if things are starting to feel better before I recommend they talk with a prescriber about starting medication. Because sometimes like talking about it and making lifestyle changes is enough, and sometimes we need to add some medication in to really help,
Mhm.
especially if the anxiety is so intense that it's hard to practice the stuff that's going to make it
Right.
easier. I know that I'm not on medication right now, but I have been in the past, and that was
Yeah.
a big reason why I did medication. Was like
Mhm.
I couldn't calm myself down enough to go to the gym, to
Yeah.
sleep, to like talk about my feelings in therapy. And so it was super hard to do that until I had like a little bit of a more calm state
Yeah.
with the medication.
100%. And I've also dealt with that. Have been prescribed. I talked often about the Xanax that I need. And
Yeah,
I think it's so important for us to normalize one, going to therapy. I think so many
totally.
people are scared of it, of the stigma around it that you're flawed or you're damaged. And I want to point out for those listening, if you're listening and you're tuning in, you're not an anxious girl and you don't struggle with all this. One, I love that for you. I'm so happy. But just because things are going well in your life does not mean you don't need to go to therapy. In fact, I urge people to go even when things are going well because I feel like then you still learn about yourself. I just think it's healthy to talk and
Yeah,
vent and all that. And on top of all of that, go to therapy. Sometimes you just need medication. Like sometimes,
yeah,
like you said, for me personally, my anxiety got so bad to where I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I can't live my day-to-day life even going to therapy. So like I'm
yeah,
the first person to be like, sometimes you just need both. And now thankfully I'm in a place where I don't need as much medication. I'm able to talk
yeah,
and handle that. But at one point in my life, I did need it. So, as Mental Health Awareness Month, it is May. I want to point out all of that because it doesn't mean you're crazy. Or I think for the longest time, I was torturing myself because I didn't want to go to therapy. I didn't want
yeah,
to like admit that I had a problem. I didn't want to have to tell people I'm taking medication, but look, we're all for lack of better terms off the rails in our own way. So yeah, sometimes you just need to freaking talk about it. But for those who maybe aren't ready to take the step to go to therapy and like actually talk to someone, what are some ways if they are dealing with anxiety in their day-to-day life that do you have any tips for like just ways to instantly kind of take your mind from a 10 to like a 2?
yeah. So first, I think is like actually deciding to put into practice the different things I'm going to talk about. So like
Okay.
I feel like oftentimes we scroll social media and we look for the answers, or we read self-help books, and we learn the things, but we don't actually try and do the things. And I think
Yeah.
that is so helpful. And I always encourage clients too of like, I'll give maybe 5 examples of things you can do to calm down. Some of them you're going to hate and they're not going to work for you, but they're going to work for Sarah who listens to your
Mhm.
podcast, right? And so try different things and experiment and see like what feels calming to you, because it's going to be different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then pick that thing and practice it even when you don't feel anxious, because it's really hard to like start doing a breathing exercise for the first time when you're mid panic attack. But if you've done it 30 times before, it's a lot easier to
Mm-hmm.
then say, I know what this feels like. My body knows what this feels like. Like I can go ahead and do this, even though my anxiety is at a 10 right now.
Right.
So just kind of like ground rules, I guess, for
Okay.
practicing, but definitely like breathing exercises. So my favorite is something called box breathing, and you kind of breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and you hold it for 4 seconds, and can kind of visualize a box while you are doing that. It's a super helpful way to regulate your nervous system and calm down. It's actually something the Navy SEALs teach,
Hmm.
all of their people to use and kind of regulate. So it's super research backed as well. And that can just really help with regulation. Um, Exercising can be super, super helpful. I know that that's like a big part of me, both for preventing anxiety, and then also if I'm in my head, like getting outside, going for a walk or a run or something is super helpful. What else? I would say meditation is one that I hate
Oh
personally,
God, that
but
is that same. And I've been told time and time again by my own therapist, she's like, I really think that you should try it. And I'm like,
yeah.
I really think I want to jump off a bridge every time I do it. Like, it is the worst. But for some people, like I know they live by meditation. So yeah,
Yes,
I agree with your statement. I just think it depends on the person, but I am not a meditation girly.
me either. But I will say what helps me is like mindfulness, which I think is just like a little bit of a lesser intense meditation. So, like
Mm.
doing something and paying attention to all of your five senses while you're doing it,
Hmm.
right? So, like if you're washing the dishes, for instance, like paying attention to the like temperature of the water on your hands, the scent of the soap, the sound of the water running, the feel of, the plate in your hands and like the cold glass of it or whatever. And doing that for me is a lot more helpful of
Hmm.
it makes me slow down, it kind of quiets the thoughts. It has a lot of the same impact as meditation, but is not so overwhelming of like
Right.
I have to sit here for 10 minutes and listen to
You're like, I don't
somebody
know what to do.
tell me to breathe. I can't do that. I'm getting more anxious.
Yes. Oh, that's a good tip. I like that. I'm gonna try that because yeah, I get the same when someone's like, sit for 5 minutes and clear your mind. I'm like, whoa, 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 no, no, no. You don't understand how fast my mind is going. Like there is no
Yeah.
stopping this brain once it gets started. So I'm gonna, yeah, the five senses. That's a good way, I feel like, to maybe practice a smaller step into meditation.
Yes, for sure. What else? Journaling can be super helpful. So, like, actually writing out all of your anxious thoughts and just seeing them on paper can
Hmm.
oftentimes make you realize, like, some of them are kind of ridiculous, like not very likely to happen. And so that can be really helpful too.
Mm. Speaking of journaling, this was actually a listener question, and I
Yep.
I talk about journaling often. I think it is the best way for me. It's one of the top ways to ease my anxiety because for me, and I'm sure anxiety looks different for everyone, but my brain tricks me. Like my anxiety tells me such false information to the point where I actually wholeheartedly believe it. It is
Yep.
detrimental to relationships of mine, to friendships, to my own career
Mm-hmm.
because and I mean, it's what I'm trying to train my brain and everyone else out there. If you suffer from it, like your anxiety is lying to you. It is telling
Yes.
you the opposite of the truth. So if I can get it out on paper, it's almost like I can let go of that. Like I write it, I release it, and then I look at it and realize,
Yep.
oh, this is actually such a lie. Like my
Yep.
friends don't hate me. My relationship is not over. Like they don't want to never speak to me again. But for me, I my brain goes straight to pen and paper and I just write. But a lot of people have an
Yep.
issue taking that first step of writing. So someone wants to know what are some easy journaling prompts if you do have any for those who kind of have anxiety, don't know how to journal.
Yep. So I think just even like, what am I worried about right now is helpful.
Mm.
What's the worst case scenario in this situation? And then I like to also do the opposite. So, like, if you're going to do the worst case scenario, which our brains with anxiety is always going to be the first thing
Yep.
that we find, also do the best case scenario, right? So like
Ah.
maybe your friends don't hate you. Maybe they're really inspired by you and like want to be doing what you're doing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so finding kind of like that opposite, I find to be super helpful. Um, what else? Like things that you're grateful for can be super helpful.
Yeah.
Positive beliefs that you want to feel about yourself, even if you don't believe them at this very moment. Kind of like the thoughts that you wish your brain were having is really helpful too.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, because I know you talk a lot about self-confidence and stuff like that, do
Yeah.
you think that like your confidence level coincides directly with your anxiety level?
Oh gosh. I think the two can definitely be very connected.
Yeah.
Um, it's so hard to be confident when you have anxiety, right?
Mhm.
Because anxiety is really telling us that horrible things are happening. And so it's hard to trust that, like, you are worthy, you are beautiful, like, things are going to go well, which is such a key belief in order to really feel
Right.
confident.
What are some for those? Because it I'm curious. Okay, we're just gonna talk about me for 1 second because
Yeah, please do.
I'm actually very curious, and maybe some other people can relate. Because I mean, that was some questions that I got. It's like, it's affecting my confidence. How do I do that? Whatever.
Yeah,
For me, like I'm so confident when it comes to me. I'm like, I am great. I'm awesome. I love myself. Like I show up on the internet truly as someone who loves, and it's taken me a while to get there. But for
yeah,
me, my anxiety affects my confidence in different areas. So for me, that's and I'm working on this where it's like it's easier for me to be alone. Like I have to really talk myself into relationships and stuff like that because that's where my anxiety affects my confidence. Is it
yeah.
possible for that to happen? Like can you be anxious in one area of your life but then so 180 different in another area?
I think yes. And like, I would also challenge you of what like doesn't feel confident in the relationships. Like, how does that connect to
Mhm.
areas where maybe you don't feel confident in yourself? Even if it's like I'm confident in my career and how I show up online and how I look and, you know, what kind of friend I am and daughter and whatever.
Mhm.
I think there's probably still some pieces where you don't feel confident in like how you show up as a partner or why you're worthy
Right.
of, you know, a really grounding partner who's going to be very secure and like treat you well. And so that would be kind of my question of like, is there an area where
Okay.
we still need to work on confidence that maybe is being triggered by anxiety a little bit?
Yeah, probably. That sounds about right. Oh my goodness. Speaking on, okay, all of this, and I know for me, my anxiety leads to self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm sure, very common. When you start, so we're gonna kind of transition into like overthinking because I feel like that goes along with self-sabotage, and that's
Oh, yeah.
so detrimental for me. That's kind of where I struggle the most with my anxiety. So when people start to overthink and their anxiety takes over and they start to self sabotage, how do you recognize it and how do you put a stop to it?
Yeah. You can tell me if you don't want to talk about it, but can you give an example
Yeah,
of like what self sabotage looks like for you? I feel like that's
absolutely.
always a little bit easier than the hypotheticals.
100%. I'm like,
Yeah.
look, I spew my life all over the internet with no issues, which is kind of problematic. But for me, like self sabotages, I, have been in this long distance relationship and it
Yeah.
has been so wonderful. But I will find something, and I think it's me getting scared of
Yeah.
getting hurt. My anxiety is telling me, like, don't go all in. Like, you are going to get hurt. So back out. So I will find something and I will start putting the blame on myself. So like if say we had an argument, like a
Yeah.
normal argument. Everyone has arguments in relationships and friendships,
Yeah.
whatever. I will take that argument and say I can't come back from this. It's too far gone. They're even though they're like, "Hey, like we've moved on." Like, you know what? Maybe we
Yeah.
didn't communicate well, but we have put this in the past. And my mind goes, "Nope, that one and done. You cracked this image of perfection. There's
Yeah.
no way that you can go forward. There's no way that someone, so it's like even I won't listen to their words, even though they're verbatim saying, "Hey, we had an argument. Chill. Cool. We've moved
Yeah.
on." My brain goes, "You got to tap out right now." So that's where I self-sabotage is I just look for the worst as a way to
Yep.
protect myself.
So two things come up for me is one, like, can you decide to trust either certain people in your life or to make it a blanket rule for everybody until proven otherwise, that like
Mm,
people are going to say what they mean and that we are going to take that at face value.
right.
And if we need to ask like additional follow-up questions, we can. But like that the first assumption is that if somebody says they're good, they're good. If somebody says they're mad, they're mad. If somebody says, they're jealous, they're jealous. If someone says they don't care, do whatever you want, they mean that.
Mm-hmm.
And that people are going to be kind of real with us, even when those are hard conversations. And I think even like the fact that you're having an argument is kind of evidence that this person is like doing that, right? Like they're telling you when they're upset about
Mm-hmm.
something already and they're telling you now when they forgive you. And so just kind of letting yourself take what they say as fact, I think is really helpful.
Yeah.
What comes up for you there?
No, I agree with that. And I think for me, it's you hit the nail on the head when it comes to trust.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone listening can relate to this. I have dealt with cheating in the past,
Yeah.
which breaks trust. So for me, I'm like, I
Totally.
dealt with that. That was so hard. I don't want to deal with that again. It's honestly, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. This is probably my anxiety talking, but in situations like that where you need to trust or relationships and self-sabotage, I prefer to look at the worst case scenario because
Uh-huh.
I'd rather prepare myself for the worst thing to happen. So my mind is already like, all right, this could happen. Here's your response. And then if something good happens, it's like a nice little treat. It's like a little cherry on top that I wasn't expecting versus if I'm like, oh, this is great and amazing. And I'm expecting good to happen. And then something bad happens, I'm devastated. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. One of my favorite quotes that I try my hardest to live by is worrying is like putting a down payment on a problem that you don't even have,
Oof.
right? Like, why? I know that it is so easy to do this with anxiety, but like, why live all of your life with all of the worry, with all of like the negative assumption when like things could be good now? And also trusting yourself that like, you've been through shitty times before, like guys have cheated on you and you've been able to make it through to the other side. So like, if God forbid that happens, that you can get through it again, right? And so
Right.
like you can have, I don't know, like a more positive life now and trust that if you feel disappointed, if you feel scared, if the relationship doesn't work out, you can get through that too, instead of just having everything kind of be like a base level of suck as
Mhm.
default.
I do love a base level of suck. That's how I live my life, which is it is so funny and I show up so positive for other people, especially like with
Yeah.
my platform. I preach positivity and all that, but when it comes to specifically relationships cuz they just scare me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I base level of suck is where I live. But yeah, that's I think that's a really important thing to remember for the overthinkers, for the anxious people who yeah, live their life in a state of worry. It's like, well, what if it is good? Like you're almost like taking that away from you're not giving yourself the
Yeah.
good because you're just assuming all the bad. So I'm gonna remember that. Can you repeat the down payment statement
Yeah.
so I can in
Worrying is like putting a down payment on a
mm,
problem that you don't even have.
wow. I'm gonna put that on a t-shirt and sell it. That is
Yep.
that is good. I will credit you all of that. Everyone, if you're listening and that relates to you, repeat that in your head 5 times because I do think that is so true. It's like why torture yourself unnecessarily, just because you're used to, expecting the worst. So
Totally.
totally
And I
get
think
that.
like opening up and talking about it is so helpful too, like to the person who's, I guess, like kind of on the receiving end of that anxiety, right? Like how you said, it's scary of fighting because now I've broken this like facade of perfection. The
Hmm.
same kind of happens. And when we talk about our anxiety too, right? Like that feels so vulnerable to say, I'm really worried about this. I'm really worried maybe you don't like me anymore. You don't find me attractive because of this or whatever. But I think actually speaking to it makes it so
Mm.
much less scary, because kind of like the same as writing it down with journaling, it's no longer in your head. This person
Yep.
has a chance to reassure you and help you feel good. Um, and then it doesn't feel like so big anymore as all of the what ifs when we're
Right.
keeping them to ourselves.
Yeah, I think that if you're listening, you have anxiety is the biggest takeaway. However you can, I think you just need to get it out of your head.
Yep.
And yeah, for me, I got to work on like maybe journaling more because as an anxious girly, I need to speak it. And unfortunately, or
Yep.
fortunately, I speak it to friends and family in the internet, which is a good thing because it brings people together and you're not alone. But then I'm
Yeah.
like, now my problems live on the internet forever and for everyone to remind me of the things that I've said. But I do think it is so important to say it. And for me, I have been working on that directly of like speaking, especially in relationships, is look,
Yeah.
as someone who dealt with a poor past relationship with infidelity, etc., whatever, I was met with anytime I brought something up, it was shut down.
Yeah.
It was gaslit. You don't get an opinion. You're crazy.
Yeah.
So it made my anxiety spiral more. So for me, I've been having to retrain myself with someone new to speak on it. And if you're also scared of that, I think my best piece of advice, and I'm sure you agree with this, is the right person is going to accept it and they're going to listen to it and they're going to make
Yeah.
you feel safe and secure. Whether that goes for if you're talking to your parents, your friends, a new partner, a therapist, like if someone is like, you're anxiety, what? Like you're crazy, that's
Yeah.
probably not the right person for you. So, I don't
Totally.
know, take that with a grain of salt.
I think too, it's so helpful is like telling people what you need. Like my husband
Mm,
and I get into this often with my anxiety is he like hates to see me anxious. And so his first default is to try and fix it, not by saying like you're crazy or it doesn't exist, but he's like, like let's go for a walk, like let's do this thing, like have you thought about it this way, whatever. And I'm like, I don't need you to fix it. Like, I just need to spend 5 minutes talking about it and for you to like see me in this, even though it feels embarrassing and vulnerable and scary to say. And that in itself is like fixing it. Right.
mhm.
And so I think even being able to say that to a partner and say whatever it is that you need in that moment, like maybe you actually want them to fix it. I don't know. But that is helpful, and their ability to like respond and do that, I think you'll see is so different than with your ex, right? And
Yeah,
that's super telling of like, even if they don't get it right the first time, can you tell them what you need, and can they like respect and try and do their best to give you that?
100%. Yeah. No, I think the hardest thing for people with anxiety to learn is it's okay to say what you need.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like anxiety tricks us into saying, you know what, you're crazy. It's in your head. Like, you don't deserve to say what
Yeah.
you need and have someone reciprocate it. But yeah, I think the best thing is just to constantly show up and in a calm manner. Like, I think for me,
Yeah.
I bottle stuff up in my head so much in my anxiety. And then by the time I get to the breaking point, it explodes. So when I say what I need, it comes across a little, hate to
Yeah.
say it, but a little crazy. So if you can say
Yeah.
it when that anxiety pops in your head and say immediately what you need, I think it will be better in the long run. But yeah,
Totally.
just your needs are valid no matter what they are. And don't let your anxiety tell you otherwise.
Yeah. Even the little ones before you have a list of like 15 things,
Yes.
like it doesn't always have to be a whole conversation, but just a little one-off anxiety is a great place to start too.
Yeah, 100%. Well, speaking on, since now we're kind of on the topic of relationships,
Yeah.
I talk often about attachment styles. I think they're
Uh-huh.
so important. And
Yes.
I am an shocking, I know. I am an anxious attached girly. What? Who would have freaking guessed? But what is wild, and I'm curious your take on this, is I started as a secure attach. Like when I was in my
Yeah.
early 20s, I'm actually curious, like what your take. You know, you can go ahead and just like I'm your case study. Tell me what you think. I started very secure attached. I used to not have any anxiety. Like back in
Yeah.
college, it did not exist. I was just carefree, go with the flow. What's Xanax? What's a therapist? I didn't know. Like, I didn't
Yeah,
care. And then as I got older, and especially as, I experienced more of life and reality TV and bad relationships, I became someone who was so secure to so anxious and anxious attached.
yeah,
So, what's your thoughts on attachment styles? How do they shift? And once you are an anxious attached girly, can you get back to a place of secure attachment in your relationships?
totally. So attachment styles are primarily formed like in early childhood,
Okay.
right? Based off of your relationship with your parents and like how attuned they were to your needs. But they totally, totally shift throughout your life, right? Like it's super normal how you were saying you had these negative experiences and you
Mhm.
went from being securely attached to anxiously attached. But what's really cool is that that can also happen the other way around. So whether or not you've always been anxiously attached or you develop that after a shitty relationship, you can become securely attached too. Like our brains can learn new ways to think about things, new ways to relate to things. And one of the most healing things that you can do for your attachment style is be in a relationship with somebody who is securely
Mhm.
attached. It is just so grounding, and the way that they view the world is like truly wonderful. I'm also anxiously attached, and I would say
Yes,
I'm,
queen.
we're still getting there. My securely attached husband, but I'm like, we've been together for, gosh, I don't know. We've been married for 2 years at this point, but probably together for 5 or 6. And it takes time, right? Like it's not always an overnight,
Mhm.
I'm dating a healthy partner and now I get to feel healthy too.
Yeah.
But it gets there. And that can be super, super cool to kind of like see and experience in your own life.
For you also being an anxious attached girly yourself, what do you and your part I don't yeah, because I'm currently I'll
Yeah.
just be totally transparent. I also am seeing someone who is very secure, and
Yeah.
they give me a lot of reasons to feel secure, but I struggle so hard still. Like they give
Yeah.
me every reason, but my anxiety still is like every time there's conflict, I don't know if you can relate. It's like, well, that's it. They're leaving. My anxiety is too much. I'm damaged. Like I am not deserving of a secure attached relationship because I'll never get there. So for you, like and your partner,
Yeah.
how are you getting over it? You're happily married, so that gives me a lot of hope. But like yeah. So any tips regarding your attachment style? Hit me with
Yeah.
them.
I think both things are super helpful of like one, doing your own therapy, which it sounds like you
Mm-hmm.
are, of like, talking to somebody, working on yourself and working on those beliefs for yourself. And then two, sharing it with your partner and letting them know, like, this is something I'm working on. It's helpful to me if you can give me reassurance with this, or I'm working to trust myself. I actually don't want reassurance with this. I think either of those options is totally good. And looking for the evidence, I guess, that things are going well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like your brain is going to try and find all the evidence that they hate you and that they're going to leave you
Yeah.
and that, you are too anxious and they don't want to listen to it and whatever. But also looking for that evidence that like they showed up, they checked in the next day about something I was feeling anxious about the day before. All those things that signal that it's not too much for them, that they want to show up for you, that they want to be there, and really kind of forcing yourself to take like that mental inventory of the things that our brains just skip right over, all the positive
Mhm.
evidence, and really find them and take a minute to like soak them in.
Yeah, 100%. And also, for those who are listening, that should be the bare minimum. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
for so long, I just accepted that my anxiety is gonna win. I will never get that reciprocation. But, like, really what you just described should be the bare minimum
Yes.
standard for relationships. So, I have a lot of single listeners, a lot of, like, young single listeners. So, if you are listening, do not go for if the F boy is telling you and blowing you off and you're not getting a response, abort mission now. Because
Yes.
especially if you're an anxious girl, there will be someone who is secure enough and will help you through it. So yeah, I guess it's just like a matter of not settling, especially like in the age of dating. It's so brutal.
Totally. And like knowing that that's what you need, right? Like,
Hmm.
there's no way, I think even non anxious people are going to feel anxious when somebody is blowing them off, when somebody is not like
Yeah.
doing what they said they were going to do, when somebody's being a jerk to you, right? And if you're anxious, like you really can't tolerate that. And so, like, how can we kind of raise the bar and know what you need in order to be happy, which is somebody who's going to show up, own their shit, like be there for you.
Yeah.
That's kind of what a relationship is for, you know?
Ah, preach. In 2024, you would think that we would be better at relationships, but no, alas, we are not. At least not the men in Nashville, Tennessee. But
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna move on past all of my issues. I want to get through some of these listener questions because there
Let's do it.
was a lot. So first, starting with someone asked, "What is your advice to keep anxiety from manifesting physical symptoms or health anxiety?" Like for me, my physical symptoms: racing heart, lack of
Yeah.
appetite, lack of sleep. What would be your advice on that?
Yeah. So one, I would say like trying to do the lifestyle changes to support that, right? So exercising, like getting in bed at a decent hour, not being on your phone before you go to bed,
Mm.
is super
All the
helpful.
things that I do. It's shocking I have
All
anxiety.
the common sense things that we have a hard time
Right.
not doing, like forcing yourself to eat, even if it's like a comfort meal, right? But like eating throughout the day so your blood sugar kind of stays stable. And then I think too, like if you're doing all of those things and it's not getting better, that's when considering medication can be super, super
Mhm.
helpful. I know somebody asked about health anxiety too. Like I think having a hard no Google rule is really helpful because
Mm,
you're always going to find what you look for, you know?
true.
Like,
Oh my god, WebMD. Let me tell you about the amount of times I'm like,
yeah,
"I'm dying. I need to go to a
yeah,
doctor because I have a chronic illness and I am dying." And it's like, "No, you had allergies. Calm down."
yeah, yeah. And so I think like you knowing that that's just going to fuel the anxiety
Mhm.
is super helpful.
Yeah, 100%. Let's see what else. Ooh, this also rings true to me. How do you train your brain to not respond to the untrue thing that anxiety is telling you?
Yep. Hmm. I think first off, like I love that this person recognizes that it's that anxiety is telling you. So that is a
Mhm.
super helpful starting point. When you can pinpoint it as anxiety, then I think that it becomes that much easier to decide not to act on it. For me, it's been a lot of like recognizing I like it doesn't align with my values to operate from a place of fear, right? And
Mhm.
so like I'm not going to do or not do something because I'm scared of it. I'm going to do or not do something scared because I want to. And so kind of like recognizing that I think is really helpful and having like a bigger why behind it. Because we can do things that are uncomfortable. We do them all the time. And it's about recognizing like that that's really recovering from anxiety is not that you're never going to feel anxious or scared of something again, but that it's not going to run your life and affect all of your decisions and relationships and career and all the things.
Yeah, 100%. This person, which God, I'm like, these are my people. Like I relate so much. Okay, overachieving and perfectionism, I feel
Yeah.
like does coincide with anxiety for the
Mm-hmm.
people who feel like they need to go, 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 perfect everything. Like,
Yep.
what is your advice to them? Is there a way to put a stop to that? Is that something that they're going to deal with their whole entire life? Like, how can they find some relief in being messy or being not perfect?
Yep. I can definitely also relate. And I would say that this is probably like number one thing I'm still working on in my own therapy. And I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to really believe is that like I'm good enough even if I'm not doing my best, right? Like I'm good
Mhm.
enough even if I'm not killing it. And I'm still like an ambitious person. I want to be killing it. I want to be doing my best, but that doesn't mean that like if I'm not, that I'm not a good person or not
Mhm.
um, worth anything. And so I think that trying to separate those two can be super helpful. And then something else too that I've done is like doing something half-assed and seeing what happens, right? Like
Ooh.
it can be something low risk, right? Like maybe it's not the biggest work opportunity you've ever had or something, right? But like sending an email with a typo, doing a presentation
I'm
and
dead.
not having all the things. I'm serious though, it feels
Yeah.
very hard,
Yeah.
right? And to do it and be like, oh, nobody cared. Nobody corrected me. No one
Literally.
like didn't hire me. Nobody fired me for it, right? Like doing those things can be so helpful to just like show ourselves that it doesn't need to be 100% all the time and that the world's not going to collapse if that's the case.
100%. And for me personally, I also struggle with this. I feel the need to do everything and do
Yeah.
it perfectly. So as I turned 30 and had a total mental breakdown, had to fly home to Texas, had to cry to my parents, like
Yeah.
questioned everything in my life, didn't know if I wanted to change my career, everything. I wrote down on my little whiteboard everything on my plate, everything I have to
Yeah.
do, every task that I've taken on, and I then made another column of what actually brings me joy from those
Yeah.
things. And it turned out it was only like half of them. And it
Mm-hmm.
was the hardest thing for me because I said, okay, the things that you did not write down, you need to get rid of because if they are not bringing
Yeah.
you joy, and also like I had to take into account if they're not bringing me an income and they're not adding to my business, there's no reason for you to be doing them. Even though in my brain I said, but I've taken on the task and now people associate me with them. So I can't give them
Yeah.
up because then if they see me giving them up, I'm a failure and I wasn't able to do
Yeah.
it. So if you're listening to that, I really encourage you to, if you write it down and you're able to see it, and then you're also able to see it in front of you, but these are the things that really bring me joy. I think it's a lot easier for your brain to grasp. And then my question for you, now that I've done that, um, do you have any advice for, I mean, I guess you kind of just touched on that for like actually letting go? Because I know in my brain, I'm like, well, I'm going to let this
Yeah.
go. But I think one person to me in the back of my mind is like, yeah, but girl, you can still do that. Like just carve out 5 minutes of time and like maybe you can still get it done. So
Yeah.
advice on that.
I think it's about like trying to shift the belief a little bit around what success is,
Mm,
right? So like you're not a failure if you choose not to do those things. Like that's actually building a successful business and a successful life where you're doing the things that bring you joy and where you're able to let go of the things that are not, right? Like I actually think that that's way more courageous and way more a sign of success
mm,
than somebody who just checks off like all 100 things on their to-do list. And so I think reminding yourself that like it is super scary and super hard to give up stuff, and doing that is actually like a step towards success.
mm.
And then something else too is like every yes is really a no for something else, right? And so
Ooh.
like what is that going to be? I don't know. Maybe it's another work opportunity you can't do. Maybe it's sleep. Maybe it's a fun
Uh,
plan. Maybe it's, you know, peace of mind, time to like make lunch in the day, whatever it is. But you are always picking, there's always a trade off for better or for worse. And so is it really worth it to be doing this stuff that like isn't giving you money,
ooh.
isn't giving you joy, isn't giving you satisfaction, isn't helping people? Like,
Right.
why? You know?
Just right. And especially just for whatever your definition of success is. And I think, oh
Yeah.
God, that hit me so hard of like, yeah, what is your definition of success? Is it just being seen by other people as the girl who can do everything? Or is it taking stuff off your plate, focusing more on a business? And yeah, I
Yeah.
think there is, I think success actually is admitting I can't do it all. And that
Yeah.
it took me 30 years to kind of realize that as someone who has a business, an app, a podcast, a fitness thing, a blog, a book club,
Yeah.
like I'm like, Jesus Christ, like why did I do all this? And it took me 30 years to be like, oh no, I actually think success is being able to take a step back and be like, I don't enjoy some of these things anymore and I
Yeah.
don't want to do them and I want to put my attention on this. And that's where I'm going. And hopefully you can kind of encourage other people to do the same. Like I think that's actually like the true definition of a successful person.
Totally. Something else that's helped me is like no decision, maybe not no decision, 99% of decisions are not permanent, right? So
Mm,
like you can decide not to do, I don't know, the book club. And if in 3 months you miss it, you can say, you know what, I'm bringing the book club back, right? And so giving yourself sort of that permission to say, like, let me try it without it and see how it feels. And if I really miss it, you can do it. If people really miss it, you can do it.
Wow.
But kind of not having that be that first default.
Wow, Kelly, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that statement. So, like in all aspects of my life, like because everything just seems permanent. And you're so right.
Yeah,
Nothing is permanent. Like you can say goodbye to someone and a month from now reconnect with someone, or you can say goodbye to what you thought was an opportunity and a
totally.
month from now decide you want to try it again. So oh gosh, that was so needed. So thank you for that little bit. Couple more
Good.
listener questions. Social anxiety. It is something that I personally have never dealt with.
Yes.
I can talk to a wall, a plant, a dog,
Yep.
a stranger. It has never been an issue for me. So when people ask me my advice on that, I really struggle to give them any because for me, I'm like, I don't know, I'll just go say hi. It's not that hard. But a lot of people have asked, what
Yeah.
is your take on social anxiety? How do you go up and just start talking to a stranger if that's hard for you?
Yep. I think like doing a little bit of preparation can be helpful, right? So if you're somebody who really struggles with that, like knowing, okay, what are some like little small talk things that I can talk about today? That can be helpful. And then also recognizing, I know this is so hard to believe if you have social anxiety, but most people really enjoy talking about themselves. Like
Mm.
it really is easy for a lot of people. And so if you have social anxiety, just ask a question, right? Like you can take the attention off of you. You can ask somebody a question and kind of be the listener. But that can be like a much easier way than, I have to go and have a bunch of stuff to talk about and a bunch of things to say. People are usually pretty good at filling that space.
Yeah. And I also I'm a big solo traveler. So I
Yeah.
will say my first solo trip, it was difficult ish for me to go up to a stranger and just like be like, hey, you don't know me,
Yep.
but like, let's chit chat. You'd be so surprised what just saying hi would do. And it's such a scary thing. But just say hi. 9 out of 10 people are going to respond. It would just take a very rude human to just completely ignore you. And if that is the case, you'll never see that human ever again. So it's like,
Yep.
yeah, they're a dick and you're going to feel dumb, but chalk it up to like, it's not you, it's them. Like they had a bad day or there's a shitty person. It literally has nothing to do with you. But I always say, like, even just walking up and saying hello, your anxiety is going to tell you that people are going to ignore you and walk away. But most humans, your instant reaction is just to say hi back. And most people, like you said, want to talk about themselves and they want to have a conversation.
Yep.
And they're probably equally as scared as you are.
Totally. And I think just like kind of the same as with any other anxiety, like really what is the worst case that's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen? Like you said, they say nothing or they judge you and think that you're weird. Like it's not life or death, even though it can feel like it with anxiety. And so I think that the more that you do that thing, the more that you kind of build the confidence and
Mm-hmm.
that bank of evidence that like, yes, most people respond back. Yes, most people will be nice. Yes, most people will want to just like talk about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I can do this. I can hold a conversation better than I thought. All of those things.
Do you have any tips for I have a lot of girls listening who are in a new city and they're trying to meet friends and like adult friendships are freaking hard. Like I can agree with
So
that.
hard.
Do you have any suggestions of like a place where you can meet people where maybe like your social anxiety would be the lowest?
Yeah. I think that like doing the same thing consistently can be super helpful, right? So if it's like picking a gym or picking a workout class or doing like an art class or going to church or whatever, but like doing that same thing like again and again, week after week, because it kind of gives you that opportunity to build a relationship over time with people. I think that that's what's so much harder about making friends as an adult versus like a kid, right? Where we all, especially if you're working virtually, like we all used to go to school. We would go to the same like
Right.
soccer game or whatever. And you kind of had those opportunities. Same with like in college, right? You went to like the same parties and kind of hung out at the same bars and whatever and got to know people over time. So I think having some of that is helpful. And then putting yourself in situations where other people are looking to meet friends, right? So like a Bumble BFF, a run club, a meetup.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of influencers in different places will host like events and stuff. And so going to something like that, where most people are kind of trying to make friends also, can really lower the stakes with some of that.
100%. And not to self promote for my listeners, but I do host group trips and they're really fun.
Yes.
And I promise, like, I'm a really cool human to travel with. And I also have anxiety. So if you get anxious, we can talk about it as much as
Yeah.
you want. Yeah, no, super helpful tips. My last listener question, and a
Yeah.
question I often, because I talk openly about therapy online. For someone wanting to get into therapy, how do you how do you find someone if you're just starting from scratch?
Yep. So one, I also have another business where I help other therapists grow their private practice.
Love.
And so something that I do as just like a service to my community is if you DM me at Sit with Kelly, what state you live in and what you want to work on in therapy, I'm happy to recommend somebody. I know therapists all over the country. So that's number one. Yes. And then number two, I would say like ask friends if they have any recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
Search like local hashtags, honestly, like searching Nashville therapist or Tennessee therapist. So many therapists are on Instagram these days, and it can be really cool to just like sort of get a feel of what this person is like, what they're for. Yeah. And then there's a website called Psychology Today, and it's kind of like just like a Yelp for therapists, I guess, like a directory. And so that can be a really cool place too. You can check off, what you're looking for, like any specialties you want them to have, that kind of thing.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah.
freaking amazing. You are doing the Lord's work, Kelly. Guys, shoot her a DM. Also, for those who are like, I love this girl, you do online therapy. I creeped on your website in what,
Yes.
Florida? Where else?
Florida, New York, and New Jersey.
All right. Well, my Florida, New York, and New Jersey girls, you know what? I might have just found you a new therapist. So I don't know. But if not, guys, I highly recommend shoot Kelly a DM. Like, take the first step, mainly because you deserve it. You deserve peace of mind. You deserve freedom from your anxiety.
Yeah.
You deserve just to have a fulfilling life. And I personally, and I'm sure you do as well, Kelly, can attest to this. Like, I know how detrimental anxiety can be. And it's brutal. So, like, do yourself a favor, take the steps, all the things. Kelly, do you have any last final thoughts? Do you want to add anything?
Yeah. So in terms of like the finding a therapist thing too, the most important thing with how successful therapy is the relationship you have with your therapist. So
Mm-hmm.
don't like overthink, are they trained in this modality or I need to find like the perfect best person. Most of us do like a free 15-minute intro call with people. So just like call 2 or 3 therapists and talk to them and see who you vibe with. Because honestly, just feeling comfortable is the most important thing in
Mm-hmm.
having it be successful.
Right. And yeah, like my therapist actually said, like, finding a therapist is like trying on a pair of pants. I was
Yeah.
like, very interesting analogy, Carly. But yeah, you're not gonna try on one pair of jeans and it's gonna fit perfectly. Like you're gonna have to go to
Totally.
multiple stores, try on multiple different styles before you find like that one pair of amazing, perfect fitting boyfriend jeans or whatever. And the same
Yeah.
with therapy. I had to go to 2, 3, 4 before I found and finally connected with someone who I clicked with and I understood and I felt comfortable with. So like don't try one and give up.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be a perfect fit right away.
Totally.
Well, Kelly, I could talk to you all day, but I'll let you get on with your life. For the people who want to follow you, and I've creeped on your socials, you post so many amazing tips about anxiety and therapy. Where can everyone find you online?
Yep. I would say I'm most active on Instagram. So come follow me at Sit with Kelly. And I occasionally post on TikTok as well, but I'm much worse at keeping up with that platform.
TikTok is hard. I'm like, I'm too old for that.
Yeah.
It's stressful. All right, guys, we'll go hit Kelly with a follow. Kelly, again, thank you so much for all that. My anxiety is much lower after this call. So thank
Oh,
you
I
for
love
that.
that. Talking about it does wonderful things.
Seriously, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Morgan. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Off the Rails podcast. It's been real, it's been unhinged, and I'll see everyone next week. In the meantime, do all the podcast things, like, listen, leave a 5-star review, and catch up with me on socials at Off the Rails with Morgan. Bye.